Hello and welcome to TEQ. Today we are going to talk about sustainability, a topic that you know is very dear to my heart, and in particular about the need to balance rigor and flexibility. That's because sustainability, although it might be simple, right? We need to be more sustainable, is indeed very complex and multifaceted and is an evolving concept that requires a very holistic and adaptive approach. I think if you're thinking about sustainability goals, you need to realize that these goals that you set often for 10 to 15, 20 years down the line have to be revised, expanded, and adapted over time because the needs of the planet are changing, but also the technologies that we can employ to address some of the issues are evolving. If you adopt a linear thinking, you're obviously thinking about sustainability as kind of a straightforward, if you like, progression from point A to point B. And that's really not what it is. It's also not just one thing. Sustainability is not just about green. It is about social, environmental, economic, and other challenges that bring together are interconnected and need to be addressed at the same time. So if you're thinking about your goals, it is about reducing emissions, gas emissions, but it's also about promoting renewable energy or conserving natural resources. And certainly is about social equity and fostering economic growth for all. If you're thinking about how all these goals are interconnected and you're looking at really rethinking or start to expand your thinking around sustainability, I want you to look at what one of my, and I hope she's not going to mind that I say that, one of my favorite leaders in sustainability, Cassandra Garber, who is going to join me today for our conversation. She is the Vice President of Corporate Sustainability and ESG at Dell, and a leader who is not afraid to be vulnerable and change the course of action as the company and herself looks more at sustainability. I think that, having joined Dell in 2021, I've been really impressed by the smarts and the passion that Cassandra has put in driving not just the sustainability effort at Dell, but also really being a thought leader in the tech industry. So I ask you to please help me welcome Cassandra to our conversation.
Thank you.
Hi. I hope you don't mind saying that you're one of my favorite.
I was a little offended because I thought you were going to say friend, and I would like to believe we're entering that category. So favorites, wonderful.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's another favorite word, friend and favorite. Look, I think I said to you that I wanted to have you be a bit vulnerable in our conversation today, because I think we need to be all honest that this sustainability thing is hard, right? If it were easy, we wouldn't set goals that are 20 years apart from where we are today. And I do think that having the courage to say we need to adapt and change our course of action because of different things, sometimes our internal things, sometimes our external things, is very healthy. So that is something that you did this year. You just published your ESG report a couple of weeks ago, and you changed some of your ESG goals. And I would like you to share with us and the audience your thought process there and what happened.
Yeah. The first thing I want to say, thank you. Always start with gratitude. Thank you for having me, but way more, thank you for having the conversation, because I think right now is the time to talk about these things. And so just first of all, thank you. I'll share what we did and then why we did it. So what we did with our 2030 goals is we stopped, we paused, we reflected, and we said, given all of the things that are happening in the world, we need to make some changes. So what we did was we went from about 25 different goals to 9. So we dramatically reduced the number of kind of top line goals. Now, those others didn't necessarily go away. They might be nested because they were goals that actually contribute to another goal. So we did some of it is just cleaning up, getting clear about which ones contribute to another. So we now talk about key drivers that drive to those top 9 goals. So that was one of the things we did just to get clarity. The other thing we did was we did a better job of connecting to the issues we're trying to tackle. So now you can look at all of those 9 goals, which have been prioritized against the impact areas that we have selected as a company. You can see where each goal contributes to climate action, circular economy, inclusive workforce, and digital inclusion, because those are the material topics that we have selected and we are driving towards. So just communicating the connection of how each goal drives to those things was a big kind of forward progress we made, and makes it clearer and easier to talk about the ways in which we are contributing to those areas. The other thing we did is we actually got more aggressive and ambitious from a climate perspective. Scope 3, I think we're going to maybe talk about that, so we can dive in a little bit more about what we did, but we are more aggressive in what we did from a Scope 3 perspective. So we did get more ambitious in some areas that we have found we can and or should get more ambitious. And then we added where we had gaps. So we had a gap in security. We talked about ethics, we talked about privacy. So we were making sure to cover those things, but we weren't setting targets and goals that were specific around security. So we took what was an ethics and privacy focus and we made it a trust pillar. So we now have an entire set of key drivers that drive to trust, which for us includes ethics, privacy, and security, among other things, of course. But from a goal setting perspective, we've put things in place as much as, and that's what you'll see externally. So you can see, look at, here are all the changes we've made. Here are the new goals. Here's more aggressive. Here's how we're communicating it and what we're contributing to. Internally, I would say we made just as much change as what you see externally. So the other really important thing that is happening now, there are new tools. There are new methodologies that have improved even in the past few years. These 2030 goals we have are only from 2019,
Right.
But the approach you take for some of the goals, like for us, we have a significant goal that's around 1-to-1 take back. So in the past, it's been one product that every product we sell to every product, or for one, we take one back for every one we sell. We're now talking about 1 metric ton because we weren't in alignment with the industry before. We weren't accurately being able to reflect how much, because we were doing it in unit. There's a big difference with different, weights of different units. So we are having much more accurate reflection. Inside the company, we have completely overhauled how we govern all of this as well. So we now have clarity of who owns, what executives at the senior most level are accountable and responsible. What are the processes to approve? What's our bridge to 2030? And again, back to the methodology. So I would say we had just as much internal change as is visible externally on how we were driving to those goals.
I love the fact that you said about the kind of 25 to 9, and some are nestled underneath those 9, because I think that helps drive that intersectionality of sustainability with social impact, with economic equity, and all of it. Sometimes we don't think about it like that. And I think that creating those, if you like, dotted lines between goals is absolutely critical to make it clear to people that sustainability is not an isolated thing that you address.
I could not possibly agree with you more. So that the E, the S, and the G, we all love it. It's nice and happy, and you can organize things that way. And we all kind of have to live in those confines sometimes. But that is not how these issues work. Almost none of the issues that we're talking about are either environmental or social, and or don't have governance associated with them. So
yeah.
when we've been, as I mentioned, we have our 4 priority impact areas. When we plan against those areas, we don't plan against what are we doing for the environment and have an environmental strategy. No, we have a climate action strategy. We have a circular economy strategy. And that strategy is in our own operations. It's what we're doing for our customers. It's what we're doing for society at large. And you can't possibly not include social impacts, even though that feels to people like an environmental topic. the whole point of saving the climate is for the sake of people. So at
Of
the end of
people,
the day,
absolutely. Yes,
at the
yes,
end of the day, it's a very social issue. We
it
just don't
is.
always frame it that way. So starting with the issue and planning that way is how we try to cover that.
Yeah, and although, the current climate maybe doesn't allow us to speak about the social impact as much as we would like to, it is absolutely all about the people, and it starts and ends with the people. You mentioned scope 3, and for tech companies in particular, but generally, scope 3 is the most complex problem to solve when it comes to emissions. What is your approach both in how you measure and then how you tackle scope 3?
Yeah. Scope 3 is fun because because it is the one that is, especially, and Del, we like to know exactly how we're going to get to something. We like to have ownership of it. We have a plan, we have a process, we have rigor to get there.
You
Scope
have
3.
data. Yep.
Oh my gosh, scope 3 forces us to work way outside our comfort zones. And when you know some of our most senior and very vocal executives, you know what it takes to get scope 3 targets set for our company, because it is so outside a normal way of working. It is so much dependent on working with others and on what other countries and governments are going to do. Being reliant upon the grid changing in other parts of the world is a very tough thing for companies to take on and set targets around. It's necessary. That's why we all end up doing it. That is what it takes. This is the whole point of it being systemic. For us, just like any other company who's doing this and doing this well, you want to do a couple things. You want to make sure you identify where it's most material to you. So your scope 3, you don't start addressing all categories.
Yeah.
Figure out where it's most material and get SBTI involved. Follow their guidance. Make sure that you get SBTI approval, because if not, we're not all working on with the same methodology. Back to that conversation, we're not all working towards the same goals. We're not all following the same science, if you will, because some people claim there's different ways to look at these things. So at least we're working on the same thing by following SBTI and getting their approval and agreement. For us, it was Cat 1 and Cat 11, which means it's our suppliers and it's the use of our products. And those were very, very clearly the two big buckets that we needed to focus on, most material to us by far. Working with our suppliers is something we're actually pretty dang good at as a company. We have a phenomenal, team approach and all of that. So it's more a matter of exactly what are we going to expect and when. And it is supporting them in setting our own SBTI targets, supporting them with our own best practices in terms of how we're doing it, how we're setting our goals, achieving them, and holding them accountable as well. But more so a partnership approach, very much so. How can we help you get there? Much more than we expect this by this date kind of thing. From a product standpoint, here's where the innovation comes in. Here's where we have to make sure that we are making our products more energy efficient so that in their use, they are reducing climate impact. But also, how are we rethinking things like green data centers? We have a big role to play in green data centers. So what role are we playing in that? Because we all recognize that that is a very, very important part for all of the data, all of the tech happening right now. It's coming back.
Especially with generative AI.
I was just going to say, dare I drop it? Because then that's a whole other tangent we can go on.
Well, we did like 15 minutes without mentioning, so we're good.
Yeah. So anyway, but from a green data center perspective, there's a ton of innovation that's going into that and a ton of focus that we have as a company on that for that very reason. And then, of course, the advocacy that we all need to be doing. And this comes back to, renewable electricity procurement in all parts of the world and those kinds of things that we can be doing, which is, again, beyond our own control, other than the work that we can do to advocate and support. So, and of course, in our own purchasing decisions. But so that's a little bit of what we've been tackling on Scope 3.
We mentioned briefly the circular economy, and as a term, the process has become, is gaining momentum. But the term, I feel, as is sometimes the case with sustainability at large, is a bit abused, right? People like to throw it out there, but it doesn't always mean the same thing.
Yep.
How do you see the circularity best impacting sustainability? Obviously, you have Project Luna, but in general, how do you think about circularity as a viable tool to get to your goals?
The way I see it is as circular business is the way we all have to be going. As a society, we're going to run out of materials.
Yeah.
If we don't start thinking about a more circular business model, circularity in design, we're in trouble. So from my perspective, the way we tackle it is it starts linear and you circle it back. So starting from what are the materials you're using, how are you rethinking it, more sustainable materials, recycled content, of course, but also renewable content, low carbon emission products and materials and things like that are something else that we think about. The design of your product itself, which is, you mentioned concept Luna. So, just thinking modularly, I'm going to make that a word, modularly, in all of our products that we offer is just a whole other way to think about product design, but also thinking about where they go. So, what happens to them at the end. And we have some fantastic services that we can talk about as well from a take back perspective, because how they're used, end of life, all of that, of course, comes in. But that also misses back to this bigger idea, which is what's a circular business look like? Rethinking business models entirely, moving into lease, moving into longer lifespans and repairability of products so that products can last longer is something that we're looking at, pretty significantly and seeing what that looks like. Another, word topic I hate to bring up because we can go off on a tangent is regulations and regulations in certain
I have questions on that. So hold that thought.
Okay, we'll get there. But they're driving this. They're bringing us back to circularity because some of the regulations are specifically around repairability, recyclability, refurbishment, and reuse of products. And so, once again, it comes back to that advocacy or being prepared for what is to come in this space as well. So thinking about this as a circular society, dare I introduce something else new that we all maybe don't need another societal, topic or issue, but this one is just as systemic as climate. There's no scope 3 for circular economy. There's no framework for us to all follow to say we need to be connecting and working outside our own operations with our suppliers, with our partners. And so maybe a scope 3 lens on that would be helpful for us all. But that's the biggest challenge. I think we're all starting to talk about what's a circular business, how are we rethinking materials, how are we rethinking design, but we're not quite at the point where we're talking about a circular society that in this circular system that we're all working together in. And that's a big opportunity and a big issue.
But so whenever I talk to a tech company, especially somebody that like Dell has a hardware business, there's always a lot of skepticism. It's like, oh, sure, you want to make things more durable, and but your business model is to sell me a new PC as often as you possibly can. But what I absolutely anchor my foot on is what you said, is that we will run out of materials, we'll run out of resources. So, from a business perspective, yes, of course, short-sighted, you want to sell a new PC. Long-sighted, you want to stay in business, and you're going to find ways to stay in business. And one of that is actually your services business that is becoming bigger and bigger. And in general, I would say, whether you're talking about consumers or enterprise, there's definitely a propensity to move away from buying hardware to moving towards buying an experience. And that experience brings along different kind of services. What is the role of services in your mind in achieving yours and your partner's sustainability goals?
Yeah, services are exactly where we're putting a lot of emphasis right now. And you even met a newly appointed leader we have in Gina Cano, who's driving this for our company, because sustainability and services it's a huge opportunity. It's a risk if we don't get ahead of all of this, but it's a huge opportunity. And we have a great legacy in this when it comes to repairability, when it comes to our take back and all of that. So we're just taking it and we're just kind of blowing it up and taking it to a whole other level, because we see this as the future. This is where we rethink business models. This is where we rethink what we can offer to our customers in all the ways. But right now, we're really focusing on that circularity perspective. So asset recovery services, where in 36 countries, you can now return assets. They don't have to be ours. We'll take any brand, but we return those assets. We, of course, scrub them, clean them up, all of that. And that's,
Safely, right? Yeah, that's
of
from a
course,
data perspective. Yeah.
yes. I mean, don't get me wrong. We all have crumbs in our laptops, and we can take care of that. But more so from a data security perspective is
Yeah.
what I was referring to from the cleanup. Um, so we have that. We also have service and tech refresh and recycle, and we've named it that way intentionally because if you want to have the latest and greatest, then you can sign up for this program. We'll give you the latest and greatest, but we will take back what you have. We will recycle. We will reuse. We will repurpose. We even have some offerings where you can make some money back. You give it back to us. We will be able to resell because there's another life for them. Our
Right.
customers can make some money off of that. And that's where this starts to become a different business model, a different shift, a different way of thinking about these things. So, and that's only, I'm just going to throw that as a teaser because that's just the beginning. We've got more coming, and including with Apex, where we actually have some data storage services where we can, clients can choose where their servers are deployed so that they actually have are in co-locations that are renewably powered. So again, you
Power.
can start to see that connection back to the green data center, and we can offer that as a service now in many parts of the world.
You mentioned earlier education and awareness, and I think that this is where there's still a lot of work that needs to be done, especially I would say within the broader ecosystem of tech, but then also internally, right? And making it kind of explaining to your internal stakeholders that is a balance where being sustainable, being having high ethics drives better talent acquisition, especially as we go into new generation. Sounds a bit fluffy, right? There's no hard numbers there, but that is a reality. So when you're thinking about, you mentioned also regulation, and I said I was going to circle back to this. Do you think that the conversation about why these matter, if you still are not bought into it actually matters because otherwise we're all going to die. Do you think that the regulation and the fact that governments are asking for more transparency and a higher level of liability, do you think that's helping the conversation?
Yes, and yes. I mean, that's the intent. That's why they're putting them into place, because governments are recognizing that we need to do this so that we all don't die, as you so bluntly put it. But it's definitely helping, but it's not the only place that it's helping. And that's what's the why. I didn't really go into the why of why we refined all of our goals, but the why is because every single stakeholder group is now demanding more from an environmental and social perspective of companies. COVID caused us to rethink everything as individuals, as families, as communities, and as companies. Who are we and who do we want to be? When the world is shutting down around us, digital divide got worse during COVID, got recognized in a bigger way, and with throwing it out there again, with AI, with data, with digitization of everything, it's going to continue to get worse. All of these things are forcing every stakeholder group that's pausing at all to think about it to expect more. So employees are expecting more of their employers. Customers are expecting more because they say the regulations, but also because of their employees, and also because they're humans and they see it. Governments are expecting more. They're putting the regulations into place, but they also are partnering on things. It's not just in a regulatory lens that they're bringing forward a lot of expectations right now. Investors are asking a lot more questions because they're seeing that this is a business risk.
Yes.
And so they're looking at it from a business perspective. They're not getting soft. They're seeing what this means from a business sustainability perspective.
Yeah. It's either a risk or an opportunity, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because it is both. Yeah.
Well, so I don't know about you, but whenever the government gets involved in anything that has to do with tech, I get kind of slightly worried because a lot of times there's very little understanding of what is actually happening. What worries you and what excites you about these higher level of scrutiny around sustainability?
In full transparency, I'm a complete reporting nerd. I geek out of all things frameworks, structure, reporting. That I started my sustainability career as a sustainability reporting lead, having no idea what I was getting myself into, and fell madly in love with it because I think that it is one of, if not the most impactful ways that we're actually going to bring about change when we're all working towards the same thing. So I get most excited about that. We're all going to be talking with the same language. We're all going to be working towards the same metrics. We're all going to have clarity of our role in this broader, in the broader set of needs, ideally against the Sustainable Development Goals, because that's the most inclusive set of goals that we should be working towards as a society. So I get really excited about, just having clarity of framework. Again, this is why I fit at Dell, because we love rigor. We love a process. We love, clarity of what it is we're working towards. And that's what I think is going to be the greatest value with these regulations. It's going to force some of that. What worries me is that it doesn't. What worries me is that the EU is doing one thing and the SEC is doing another thing. And, other parts of the world are approaching it in a completely different way. And that's where we are trying to really advocate right now and jump in and say, hey, as a global company, we need you to talk to you, and we need to all be working on the same sets of things, because the other worry that I have, and probably what affects us personally, is we spend too much time trying to meet the latest, framework, the latest submission of data or whatever, and not enough time on the actual work that is making the world a better place. And that's the balance we have to talk about as a team, is how much time we put into each of these things. I'll end on a positive note. The other thing that gets me excited about it is that the regulations are driving action. So like I mentioned before, especially in Europe and parts of the world, our customers, employees, others are seeing the regulations coming, and they're saying, in order to meet this, we have to think differently. We have to rethink our products. We have to rethink our business models. So it's driving things that we've been trying to do without, the stick. It's been carroted, and now we've got a little bit of a stick, and it helps. It makes a big difference in actually trying to drive this work.
That is actually, as we mentioned AI a couple of times, where the reporting part, where I think there's opportunity for AI to come in and help, and especially the balance that you were talking about, spending too much time reporting versus actually making a change, is very true for smaller organizations that might have smaller teams that are working on this and still have to meet those requirements. So I'm looking forward to having AI being able to support that reporting structure more, so that we can actually focus on the work that needs to be done. As always, we should have like an hour-long conversation, but we have about 2 minutes left. And I want to bring you back. You mentioned security, privacy, and trust earlier. And this is one of the things that jumped out at me in the report. The fact that by 2030, you now have a goal that you want your customers and partners to rate Dell Technology as the most trusted technology partner. I know why trust matters to you, and it should matter to every tech company in the world. Tell me, though, why you thought it was important for you to actually set a goal for this.
This is how we work. You at Dell especially, but I know many companies like ours, you measure what matters. And this is a perfect example of measuring what matters. And if we are forcing ourselves to put rigor, to put structure, to put governance around actually achieving trust in a metric kind of way, in a very public kind of way, it will put a whole new level of emphasis on it that I think we're really excited about. Trust can be fluffy. Trust can be just like we were talking about before. It can feel like that. So, putting a number against it, putting a rigor against it, putting key drivers underneath that broader goal against it, that's how we intend to drive a new level of conversation about it. And we know that we're leading in that. We know that it's a big topic, it's a big issue, and there are lots of things that contribute to trust. So we know what we're signing up for, and I think we're pretty excited about it because it's something we think we can bring in a unique and differentiated way.
Well, it certainly bring a different level of accountability to the
Mm.
business, and I'm kind of here for it, to be honest with you, because I think with so much change that is coming from a technology perspective, that level of the trust and the level of trust that a company has is going to be more and more critical, both from a consumer perspective and an enterprise perspective. Um, we're at time, unfortunately. I am ever so grateful for you spending half an hour with us talking about important topics, and we only scratch the surface. So I'm sure I'm gonna have to ask you to come back and tell us more. But in the meantime, for people who want to follow you and continue the conversation, where can they find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Cassandra Garber. You can find me on Twitter. You can find me on Instagram if you'd like, but you're going to see a lot of my family if you look for me there. That's a whole other thing. So yeah, I try to be in all of the places as best I can. A big part of this, as I mentioned, is talking. So myself, my team, and a lot of others in the company are trying to be very vocal about this, because the point right now is to talk about it in order to drive action. So I'm there.
Absolutely. 100%. I think that we all need to be more vocal about what matters, whether it is sustainability or diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I always appreciate your voice and your, as I said, your smarts and your human side that is always right, left, and center. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for all the insights, and I wish you an amazing rest of summer.
Same to you. Talk to you soon, Carolina.
Bye.
Bye.